begins right now. Hello everyone, welcome to eLearnChat. This is episode, I think, 93 or 94. It's getting up there. And it is April 17th. Welcome. And today we've got Dawn back. Let's see, were you gone last week? Was it last week or the week before?
Week.
The week before, right?
Yeah.
There's Dawn. There's Dawn.
Hello.
Say hello, Dawn.
Hello.
And we got Dawn actually resting at home. Well, not resting, but at
Right.
home. Not on the road for a change.
Next week. Back on the road.
Oh,
Pretty much steady for 6 weeks.
Was that Memphis?
Memphis. Next week I'll be in Knoxville.
Oh, Knoxville.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Memphis the week after.
That sounds good. You go a lot to the kind of that whole area, don't you?
Those are my states. Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Missouri, Alabama, Wisconsin,
Wow.
Minnesota.
Wow, that's a lot.
Crazy.
And I don't know if I list... Oh, Michigan. I have 12 anyway.
12 states that you visit?
Did I say Tennessee?
Is there somebody else who does the other states?
Yeah, we have somebody for the West and somebody for the East.
So you get the okay states. They're not bad.
Yeah, it just changed again recently, but I've kept Ohio for the 5 years I've worked for the
Got to go
company.
back to Hawaii states, though.
Yeah, that was a different employer.
Oh, it was? Okay.
We don't have any business in Hawaii.
None at all?
Brookdale, no. So this time, if I ever go again, which I hope to do within the year, I'm going to go as a complete 100% tourist. Instead of, I went 5 times for work with my previous company.
Yeah, sounds fun. Of course, going to work in Hawaii is not a fun thing because then all you do is work. And by the time you get out, it's dark, you're tired, and you don't want to do anything.
Nothing's open except
and nothing's
for
open.
Hollywood Boulevard.
Yep, that's true.
Honolulu, the nightclubs.
Well, today we've got Carol Nelson on. She is, she's a lot of things. She's a project manager. She owns a consulting company, Custom Training LLC. She is a writer, instructional designer. She's got a pretty extensive background. And just a quick disclaimer, Carol and I worked together on some projects, and Carol was very kind enough to come on today last moment because unfortunately I forgot to schedule. Well, actually, I didn't forget to schedule. I thought I had somebody scheduled, and unfortunately we had a scheduling snafu. But Carol was very kind to join us. And hey, Carol, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing great.
Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And Carol's from Colorado, or at least living in Colorado right now. You're not actually from originally Colorado, are you?
No, I'm a Midwestern girl, and I got tired of the gray all the time, so I moved out to Colorado about 20 years ago. So I'm not a native, but been here long enough that it's home now. So,
Yeah.
but I'm originally from Chicago.
Oh, Chicago, okay.
Yeah.
But it is gray there a lot of the time. You're right.
It is.
Is it really?
Very windy.
You know, it's funny. I've only been to Chicago twice, and both times were really sunny and beautiful days.
It is,
and that can happen too. But
It happened occasionally. Yep. It was cold though. It was in the middle of winter, but it was nice and sunny and 25 degrees.
yeah.
all that industry there. Big chunk of our food is made there and more. So.
Yep, that's true.
You know.
Hey, Carol, today we're going to talk a little bit about project management, one of those fun things everybody enjoys doing more than anything else.
I like it.
I don't mind project management. Actually, my theory is project management is great when you have good people.
I would agree.
And project management's not so great when the people aren't that good. But that's what we're there for. So how do you approach project management? Let's say you're doing an e-learning development project. What are some of the gotchas that you find with e-learning or with that kind of media creation project versus managing just a day-to-day kind of operation?
I think the biggest differences in managing an e-learning project versus simply an instruction instructor-led training is that generally there are more pieces, so to speak, in an e-learning environment. So sometimes it might include a professional voice talent. Sometimes it might include a graphic designer. Sometimes your instructional designer may be separate from your developer. It kind of depends upon how either your client or your internal organization works. So I think the challenge for e-learning in particular is that there's a lot of pieces that have to go into it, and then obviously you're also dealing with your external client, and they have their own people as well. So that makes it, in my opinion, a little bit more challenging than simply managing a project where you have just fewer players, I guess, in the mix.
Yeah, and when you have all the little components, it's amazing, and especially when you're in a somewhat creative field, because a lot of people think that e-learning is more of a corporate field. It's actually very creative as well, and you're dealing with creative individuals. Creative individuals require a different kind of management too.
I would agree. And I think, oftentimes the people that come to e-learning do have a creative side, but they also have a highly technical side. Mm-hmm. So you have different personalities, and you have to readily assess the members of the team and the best way to manage those people, because the techie guys might be up at 3 a.m. doing work, and they're very productive at that point, and yet they may not be available for your 8 o'clock meeting, or would prefer not to be available. So I think you just have to kind of know your players and understand how it is that you can work effectively with all of them and then still get the work done.
Yeah. Dawn has a cattle prod.
Ooh, gosh, send me your version. I'd love one of those.
Yeah, Dawn's probably one of the sweetest people I know, so I can't picture her with a cattle prod. Maybe a whip, but not a cattle prod. No.
Don't even go there. Don't even go there. You'll never come back from going there. So. Leva and I were chatting in the chat room because I work for a corporation and she works for a university, and so we feel like working for the man, as it were. Sometimes we feel like that bogs you down or makes it even more difficult from that aspect. You got more people invested because they're the stakeholders and so forth. Where if you're external, you get to go home and run away. At least that's my feeling.
Yeah, I find that, as a consultant, because I do have my own company, it's called Custom Training Innovations, and I think that it really depends upon the client that you're working for. Some of my clients are very easy to work for, and, I put in a normal work day and it's all good. But if you're dealing with clients who are international or lots of different time zones, or a kind of a needy client, for lack of a better word, then it doesn't necessarily match with a 9-to-5 kind of environment. So I would agree, though, that the more players that you have in the mix, the more complicated it can be. So I guess my first recommendation as you're scoping the project is to make sure that you have a really good understanding of who those players will be. So, if you are going to require a voice talent, if you are going to require, I've done some projects, some e-learning projects with localization or translation. So if you need to do that, keep that in mind. If your client, whether that's internal or external, is requiring multiple reviews, so that they want to see the storyboard, and then they want to see a revision of the storyboard, and then they want to see the e-learning, and then all those reviews impact how it is that you manage your time, as well as how you set up your deliverables. So be sure that you have a very clear understanding of all of those pieces, and ask lots of questions in the beginning so that everybody has everything out on the table and there are fewer gotchas when you're a third of the way down the project and suddenly another review cycle is required. I've even found that if you have just a few reviewers, 1 to 3, that takes less time than if you've got 5 to 8 to 10, because then you have to, gather all that feedback, and you need to find a way to streamline that process as much as possible so that you don't drive yourself crazy.
You know, one thing I find is that, and I learned this from journalism, I didn't learn it from any instructional design course, but you mentioned asking questions, and one of the first things I think that we start with as a premise is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Mm-hmm. And that was right out of beginning journalism, and that stuck with me pretty much from high school on, that if you ask those questions, usually you're going to get exactly what you need for almost any project. And mm-hmm. But it's something that a lot of instructional designers, a lot of project managers really aren't taught. They're not taught to ask a lot of those kind of questions. It's more of, you know, who's your audience, who's this, who's that, but they don't go beyond that. And that's
right.
That's one of the reasons why a lot of projects, I think, just never quite have the communication they need, or they fail, or they just kind of go in the wrong direction. I'm working on one project right now, which I won't mention names, but and it's not one that you're working on, Carol. So just so you know, it's not
okay.
That one. But this is one where we have, it's a government project, and it was handled by a very large government contractor, and they're almost near the end of it, and I swear nobody has talked from the beginning about anything. Mm-hmm. So you look at things like that and go, okay, what went wrong there? Well, there was a lack of communication between the parties in terms of what they were trying to accomplish, how they were going to try to accomplish it, and then from there, what do you do with it once you accomplish it? So if you don't have those things set up front, like, for example, what kind of monitors do you have? What kind of screen resolution? What kind of this?
Right.
What kind of things that are really simple, but if you don't have
right.
those, you run into having the problem of, by the time it's coming into it, it's too late.
Right.
People aren't adapting to it really quickly. And this is so common of project management. And by the way, this is something like a multi-million-dollar project. It's an enormous project, and it's amazing how little was actually discussed. And that's not abnormal. I see it all the
right.
time, and especially in large projects, there's a lot of assumptions. What's that old term? Assumption. Yeah, when you assume something, it makes an asset of you and me. Assume. Anyway. You guys have heard that.
You get it.
Yesterday in a meeting, I was laughing.
You remember that one, right, Dawn?
Absolutely. I use that one often.
It's a good one because assumptions are one of the worst things when it comes to a project, and boy, do we all make assumptions.
So is your point that the assumptions are being made on the client side, that everything's going to just be perfect and fabulous, or is it your point that everybody's assuming it's just going to drive itself?
It's really on both sides. I think people just make assumptions that all is good. And if all is good, then you don't have to worry about it.
It's like my car. I want to turn the key and go.
Exactly.
Yeah, as long as it's got gas in it, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I keep telling my wife, you know, she always wants to turn the key, except one of the cars we have, you press a button.
Oh.
She hasn't quite figured that one out
those
yet.
And then am stymied. Where's the key?
Yeah, I've literally seen her trying to put the key in the button. It's like, there's a button there.
Carol, I have a question for you, and Rick too, because you manage large scale more. Do you find that the SMEs and the stakeholders in your projects are more difficult to work with the more experience they have in managing projects at their end, or are they more difficult to work with if they have no experience at this process?
I guess I'll go first, Rick, and then you can join in. I don't really have real data to make to really answer your question about whether or not they have a lot of experience or not enough experience. I think that you have to really, again, make an assessment about how you are going to work together. I think what is more of a problem is the bandwidth that that particular project manager has. Mm-hmm. You know, I've worked on projects where the project manager is, yes, doing the training project management, but, oh, by the way, they're also the project manager for the software implementation, or they're also the project manager for the new rollout of the new business unit. And that's problematic because they simply don't have the time to do both. So if you, in my opinion, that's again one of those questions that you ask up front as a stakeholder. And, I will put together a project plan, but then I always ask, okay, so according to this project plan, you need to turn back your feedback to me within 3 days. Given what's going on in your world right now, is that really possible? Is that really going to happen? Because if they're doing multiple things, then sometimes those reviews take longer, sometimes getting back with you takes longer, and that's a concern.
Yeah, and I find the same thing. Actually, you said exactly what I would have said regarding their time. I don't think we really run into hard to deal with SMEs. Most of them really enjoy working with you. And most of them, I mean, like anybody else, if you show an interest in what they do, they're more than interested to show that same interest back in you. And people like to talk about themselves. So if the SME has something they really want to share and they like talking about it, they'll share it openly. It's their time that's the hardest thing, because a lot of times they get thrown into projects and all of a sudden they don't have enough time, so they may look like they don't care or whatever. They're juggling. And so that's the only hard part, getting a hold of that SME and making sure that they have enough time dedicated to you. Now, a lot of that, again, is the project management side of it, is of cornering the time, scheduling the meetings, making sure that some SMEs just will not answer a phone call impromptu. You've got to schedule them. Yeah, and once you get to that point, then usually there's a good understanding. And I don't think we've ever run into somebody who was hard to work with as a SME. Most of them were pretty good. But occasionally you have a very busy SME. And at that point, what do you do with them? And one question to ask is there anybody else who you can delegate some of this out to? And a lot of times they go, really? I can do that? Great. Here. They'll throw somebody else at you. It's less work for them. But I
think always asking the question about what risks are out there and, having them own that verbally and in writing makes sense as well, that this is an add-on project for them and that their time is limited. That I just feel like that's important. My next question is, do you use Microsoft Project, or do you use some other project management tool? I break out in hives. Rick, about Microsoft.
Yeah, Rick, you can go first, and then I'll chime in after that.
Well, Carol and I have talked about this. We both hate Project with a passion.
Me too.
I can't think of anything I'd rather not waste time on. But, and I have used Project in the past. I've used some other project management tools. And, as a project manager, unless you've got a million projects, you wind up managing project versus the project. So in other words, you spend all your time managing Microsoft Project and updating tasks. And as a project manager, you've got to have something better to do with your day, because now you're stuck in the software and the minutia, and you're not actually working with the people who need the work. So, we use a simple tool at work called Project Bubble. I believe it's out of the UK. www.projectbubble.com. Really simple. I mean, you create your projects, your tasks, some subtasks, put some dates on them, assign them to people, you're done. You don't have to spend weeks and weeks managing these things. And it's a great list manager, if you will, because really project management is nothing more than managing lists and making sure that people are delivering when they should be delivering. And beyond that, I think a lot of people get stuck in minutia. They get stuck managing the details of the project to the point that they're not managing the people in the project. Carol?
Yeah, I would agree, Rick. And I think that it's helpful to, if the external client or your client is open to whatever software you have, then Project Bubble or any of some of those online tools are fine. However, some clients really liked Project and really are tied to that. So what I've done in those cases is I use some of the numbering and things like that are familiar to Project Manager, and set up an Excel spreadsheet that looks like some of the familiar ways that they have managed projects in the past. So in hopes that we can find a happy medium. Because I would agree with Rick, I think that some of those tools become so cumbersome that it ends up being much more work on the long run. Because the projects, overall, I don't, as a consultant, I don't have 8 projects going on at one time. I generally have 2 or 3 maybe, and I think that Microsoft Projects is really beneficial for those very complex projects that you have going on with multiple projects perhaps at one time, and I just don't find that to be the case, at least with work I do.
Also, don't you find that project is really geared towards more like a construction type business because of the nature of the detail? I mean, you could use it for software, but it's overkill in many cases.
Yeah, I would agree. I think
it's beneficial when you have a lot of overlap in resources, for lack of better words, but that's a Microsoft project word.
Right.
And any sort of redundancies, if you have to go back, I think it probably is beneficial in some of those areas, but it is not how my brain works. I've used it a few times, and I'm just not very skilled at it.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't think I'd ever get better, actually.
Yeah, I've never cared for it. The 4 or 5 times I've used it, it was always begrudgingly, and I was laughing when Carol said sometimes clients have it. When that's where an intervention is required. You just kind of work with them.
I have a question from the chat pod, which is, how do you hold individuals accountable for following through on assigned tasks and honoring timelines?
That's the cattle prod.
Yeah, I think I unfortunately have had the experience where SMEs are not very cooperative, and it's usually because, 1, the time issue, and then 2, they have been asked to be a SME by a boss or something like that, and it's added to their plate, but they didn't really want it to be added to their plate, so they are sort of begrudgingly helping. So I think if you are running into a situation where a subject matter expert is not getting you what you need, or you sent the email, no response, you've sent a gentle reminder, no response, you've called, no response. I mean, I think that you have to kind of draw a line in the sand and escalate that. So if that means going to their boss and saying, hey, we're having some trouble with Jack, he's a great guy, but I just think that this is something that he's having difficulty fitting into his very busy schedule. So is there another subject matter expert that you can recommend, or, can you have a chat with Jack and, shift some of his other priorities? But I think that too often we wait too long to escalate that, and then when things really become critical and deadlines are just around the corner and you still don't have some big pieces, that's a concern. I also find that weekly status meetings, and I have a format or a document that I use that includes sort of a status update about where we are and where we're going, action items, risks, and then even a portion where we put in, like old business, new business kind of thing. And I use that as a communication tool, definitely internally, and then sometimes externally as well, so that everybody is aware it's okay, on Friday this is going to be due, and you should have it by end of business, and then we're expecting that the following Wednesday, it's going to be returned to us or whatever. So those weekly calls with some of the key players is really critical, because I think that it serves as a really purposeful reminder on all of those pieces.
Should mitigate surprises.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely. That's all the questions I have out there, but honoring timelines is a big one, especially for complex projects.
Well, also, one of the things that happens, and this can happen whether your client's external or internal, many times when we write correspondence, whether it's email, well, it's usually email, we don't ask for what we need. It's a real common thing, is that we try to be so nice that you're not getting to the point of what you actually need from someone. Like, we'll do something. We had one recently where we delivered something, and for 5 weeks nobody got back to us. So I wrote an email and just said, okay, we're deploying tomorrow if we don't hear from you. All of a sudden we heard from them and said, okay, go ahead and deploy, thanks. but for 5 weeks we heard nothing. And so therefore, okay, well, we got to get this thing going. And so we just said, okay, action item. So if you, in your emails, you create a sense of need, urgency, and action, that's another thing that not only helps manage a project, but gets people aware that you got to move on something. You can't just sit on it. You've got to actually do something to make it happen. And so that's another thing. Make sure that your emails are to the point, they're succinct, and you ask for what you need.
Right.
A lot of people say something like, hi, how you doing? You having a great day? How's everything going? Hey, just want to let you know the project. It's like, hey, yeah, but we haven't gotten anywhere. By the time the end of the emails come around, they know you're a nice person, they've had a good conversation, but they don't have any compunction to do anything, any action item for that email. So get to the point. I mean, people, especially when you're dealing with busy people, don't go into enormously long 5, 8, 7, 12 paragraph emails. Nobody's going to read it.
Use the subject line appropriately. I can't. That's still an unsung hero.
Subject lines are important. Now, haven't you gotten emails every so often where you get a subject line? There's actually no subject. It's actually all in the subject line.
Yeah.
And boy, those kind of get your attention because then you realize, I guess that's important.
Yeah. Well, at least I know, how I can manage and prioritize what I'm going to read. But if I say action needed in the subject line,
yep, they usually kind of
the date,
usually gets their attention, right?
Right. That's what it's for.
Yes.
So.
And I would like to add on to that as well, because I find that especially some of my members of my team, even though I feel like I do a pretty good job asking for what I need, the members of my team don't. So I'll have instructional designers that will ask me for some feedback, but they won't give them a deadline. Like, I need this by Wednesday, the 24th, by the end of the day. So that everybody has a clear understanding of what's expected. And then if you don't have it by Wednesday, the 24th, at the end of the day, maybe by Thursday, you write another email. So I think that's really important.
That's actually really key, because if people don't think there's a due date, there's no due date, and then good luck. And there are some people who don't want a due date. They just want to let it kind of go along, and eventually it gets to somewhere. And no, especially in the consulting business, if you don't have a due date, you don't get to invoice, and you don't get paid, and you don't eat. So that's kind of important little things. But even internally, but even if you're internal and you're not moving a project along, what happens when it comes time for reviews or people rating you, or however your organization does it? They'll say you weren't proactive. So now you're getting dinged for basically not doing anything. Even though you had good intentions, if you don't move something along, it comes back to that old saying, you're either the problem or the solution. And if you're not providing the solution, you're not moving things along, you're not actually making sure projects and things get accomplished, then you're probably more part of the problem. And it's amazing. A lot of managers notice that. You may not think they do, but they do. And all of those little things can affect reviews, and it can affect promotions, compensation, etc. So definitely be proactive. If you're the project manager, that's your job to be proactive. If you're managing people that don't have project responsibility, but they do have task responsibility, it's important to try to get them to understand that they should be proactive. And that when they're proactive, it makes their job easier. Not only that, change it around to it makes the client's job easier. I think ultimately it comes down to whoever our clients, internal or external, are, to make them feel like they have less work to do.
So there's a little bit of conversation in the chat pod about is email the best methodology to use to move things forward, ask questions, and then Leva's asking about the legality aspects of email because it's gotten that way in Belgium, and I assured her it's that way here because we're litigious here. But address email as a project tool.
I think you have to find a balance. I think that we all, and I talk with people who experience this as well, we have so many emails that kind of fly by our desks, especially if you're, on LinkedIn and you have all those, emails that are coming from that source, or you get other RSS feeds or whatever. There's a lot of email that is being thrown around. So I think that on one hand, email is excellent for documenting. So, I emailed you on the 23rd, and you said you'd get back to me by the 25th, and here we are on the 30th, and I don't have anything from you. And, you can forward them the previous chain to show them, and if appropriate, copying the boss to see that. So I think that that's a very helpful tool, but I think that people are almost forget how to pick up the phone nowadays. And they forget that even though people are busy, sometimes a phone call is enough to, one, create a better relationship. I find that with SMEs, if you create that relationship and you are more than just an email signature, that they're more likely to make time for you. So I think that a phone is an underutilized, oddly, resource. And if you're having difficulty, don't hesitate to pick up the phone.
That reminds me, one time we were calling GTE before it became Verizon. And we were having problems with one of our lines. It was a T1 or something like that. And so we finally got a hold of a manager via phone. We just called. And the manager had the best line of all. How did you hear about me? How did you get my phone number? Didn't care about the problem. What the fix was, how did you find me? And you just think, wow, that's a manager. Hiding. Doesn't care about the customers, just hiding. And we forced him to actually get the thing fixed. But it was really interesting. The initial response was, how did you find me? How did you get my phone number? Well, somebody gave it to us. So yeah, it's interesting. But you're right. Making that quick phone call, big difference. Sometimes you can solve something in 5 seconds that might have taken a lot of emails to go back and forth. Also, when you send emails 3, 4, 5 times to the same person, you don't get a response. They may not like you. No, I mean, seriously. You never know. But obviously, they're either too busy or don't care enough to answer it. More often than not, they're just too busy. But
competing priorities.
It's priorities, and you don't know how many other 5 copy emails they're getting from other people, and it just all stacks up, and they're going, I'll get to it, and they never get to it.
To Carol's point of earlier, usually the SMEs especially this is an additional project for them. It's not part of their daily routine, and they're trying to manage daily life, whatever that looks like, business as usual. This is an add-on. It usually isn't because they're bad people and they don't care. It's just not enough bandwidth.
Now, the only time I guess you would have a SME that's not so cooperative is when they really don't care about the project. They got thrown into it. They've been volunteered into the project, and they just go, okay, fine.
Doing what they want to be doing.
Right. And so as a result, they're not as cooperative because it's really not their project. They've just been assigned to it, and they have no interest in it. And so if they're really busy, you can tell that they're juggling, and the amount of time and attention they put on you is minimal. And that just requires some deft people handling skills and trying to get them to understand that it's for their benefit too. More often than not, people are somewhat responsive and helpful. Every so often you get somebody who isn't, but it's rare.
I would agree.
So the next question that came in is, what if you record phone calls as an alternative to what I typed into the chat pod was, I think that phone is necessary from the relationship building and management standpoint. You can hear what they're saying, you can make changes on the fly, but that email helps you with having the agreement in writing.
But you were saying recording phone calls?
So then the next question was, what about recording phone calls?
There's legalities there. You have to be very careful.
Yeah, we're shying away from that at my company.
If you record a phone call and you don't have a beep that lets people know they're being recorded, you can be sued for that one. Unless you're the government, of course, in which case it's okay. Record anything you want. But that's a different issue.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, didn't you read the other day that the IRS has a mandate to record any conversation, read any email they want? And now that's going to get in the courts. Nobody knew about this one. It came out.
They're part of Homeland Security? They're above all, or what?
Yeah. So... But no, you really have to be careful because conversations are recorded. There could be private things that people don't want out. And then, of course, you have somebody who's indiscreet and then sends that recording to someone else. And then you're up for a lawsuit. So you have to be very careful. Same with, and this is just an aside, if you take a picture of somebody at the office, you really need a model release. It doesn't matter what that picture is going up for. You might take a picture at a party, and you put it up. People do it all the time, and you can be sued for that. It's amazing what you can be sued for. Unless you have something already in let's say, the employment contract that says occasionally your picture may be used. Do you agree to this?
We don't, so we're very limited. But people still sneak them up on Facebook and so forth.
Right, right. You have to be careful. You just have to be a little careful because you just may take the wrong picture, wrong time, and somebody just doesn't like it.
Well, today they're happy with you, but at some point in the future they may not be.
That's right. That's right.
That's a whole different conversation. But anyway, so that's our response to recording phone calls. Leva, I don't know if that's helpful for Belgium or not, but the larger the organization, those sorts of things have to have a smaller role.
Well,
I think.
Well, the EU's a little bit different too because they're a little more big brother than we are still. I think
As a government.
As a government, yeah, they have a little more control. So that's probably another issue that a lot of the countries in the EU are going through. Not all, but a lot of them.
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, anyway, we are at the end of the show. We've done 40 minutes already.
Good for us.
That went fast. Carol, that was a real pleasure having you on. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Of course.
And
I'm happy to do it.
Do you have a Twitter handle? Are you a tweeter?
I'm not a tweeter. I was telling Rick just recently that is my goal by the end of this calendar year to be better about that. But if people are wanting to reach me, they can just reach out to my email, which is customtrainingllc@q.com. customtrainingllc@q.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions or be of any support. So please feel free to reach out.
And that is the letter Q.
That is correct, yeah. It's
That's
just
how I typed
the
it.
letter Q by itself, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Because all the Brits in the audience are typing in Q-U-E-U-E.
Sorry.
A word that's
I'm
hard
glad
to
you caught
spell,
that, Rick.
by the
Thank
way,
you.
in times. So, yeah, I typed that in into the chat pod, but also we have it on the recording now as well. So good.
That sounds good. And
I'm going to be in touch about connecting you and my brother. So.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That would be good. That would be good.
Well, Carol, again, a pleasure. Dawn, as always. And we will see you guys in the chat room next week. And we will be back. And if you're watching the show on Vimeo, please subscribe or tell us if you like it or not. Send us feedback. We appreciate it, and we'll get back to you. Have a good one, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.